president is going after the Pope again.
Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah,
no,
it's like
not a good move.
Hot stove. Trump posted last night on social media, quote, "Will someone please tell Pope Leo that Iran has killed at least 42,000 innocent, completely unarmed protesters in the last 2 months, and that for Iran to have a nuclear bomb is absolutely unacceptable. Iran has acknowledged more than 3,000 deaths, while the UN estimates that number to be between 5 and 20,000. It is not clear what exactly may have sparked the message from the president." The Pope yesterday morning posted in part, quote, "God's heart is torn apart by wars, violence, injustice, and lies. But our Father's heart is not with the wicked, the arrogant, or the proud." Vice President J.D. Vance also weighed in on the Pope during a Turning Point USA event at the University of Georgia yesterday. Take a look.
Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important, in the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. I think one of the issues here is that if you're going to opine on matters of theology, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And it's certainly something I would expect from the clergy, whether they're Catholic or Protestant.
What are you, a king in medieval Europe warning the Pope not to talk about the Bible? That's what you just said. You know how stupid you sound, right? You know how stupid you sound when you, new to the Catholic Church, are lecturing, Mr. Vice President, the pontiff on theology and telling him he should not quote the red letters. Those are the words, by the way, that Jesus spoke. The red letters in the Gospels of Jesus Christ. And by the way, you don't have to sort through a lot of it. Just look at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers. See, this is his concern.
Did someone ask him, or did he just
geopolitics. His concern is not geopolitics. His concern is not the fighting his concern has to do with peace. Has to do, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor in spirit, he is concerned, Jonathan Lemire, with the teachings of Jesus Christ and how utterly bizarre. People will look back one day and laugh when they have the safety of distance and laugh that you actually have a vice president sitting on stage warning the Pope, God's representative here on earth for the Catholic Church, warning the Pope what he can and cannot say about theology, that he needs to be careful. Well, let me tell you something. I never hear those warnings when he's talking about abortion. I never hear those warnings when he's talking about traditional marriage. I don't hear those warnings when those warnings align with his political views. But there's a war that, let us just say, started with the killing of over 150 young girls at a school that the United States lied about initially and said, oh, we had nothing to do with that. No, that wasn't us. That was Iran. Is the Pope going to get involved in that? Is the Pope going to be concerned about that? Does the Pope think that Jesus Christ cares? Whether it's Americans or Iranians or people from other countries who are winning or losing wars? No. The Pope would probably believe, like another guy from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, that his concern is not whether we are on God's side, but whether God is on our side. And so to hear a sitting vice president of the United States, first of all, becoming a Catholic last week, and then writing a book about being a Catholic, and then lecturing the Pope, I've got to say, that's like an all-timer. And people are going to look back and they're going to have a big chuckle that anybody was ever that arrogant in that position.
Yeah, the history books. I often wonder 20, 30, 40 years from now just exactly what they'll say. This will deserve perhaps its own chapter.
Yeah,
there's a short list of people who probably can weigh in on matters of theology. I think the Pope probably on that list. That's just my guess. And you're right, but J.D. Vance, I will say in front of a sparsely attended crowd there at the Turning Point rally. To do that in the same speech, by the way, and we'll get to this later, I'm sure, where he said he was proud to deny funding to Ukraine, not just that.
Wait, hold on a second. Is that a Falcons football game? Can we see those? Can we see those seats again?
Wait. The smallest crowd in Atlanta since. Yes.
Whoa. Since the last time the Falcons played. And I'm a huge Falcons fan, but this is boring points USA. Like that's not good.
No, that's not good. And certainly Vice President Vance's comments there about both Ukraine and the Pope just beyond the pale for many. So Mark Caputo, let's bring you in on this. I mean, a fifth of Americans identify as Catholic. President Trump, was criticized even by some within the GOP for his posting that depicted him as Jesus. He claimed he was a doctor. That's not true. But that hasn't stopped him from criticizing the Pope. He did it again last night. Does anyone in the White House think this is a good idea?
Well, he did pull it down. He did pull down the original post after a significant number of advisors, both inside and outside the White House, asked him not to do it. But as his True Social account shows, when Donald Trump gets animated about something, he doesn't let it go. And therefore, it was at midnight or after midnight, this sort of behavior or these sorts of thoughts come out of him and wind up on his True Social account. And there is a general sense in the White House and in Trump's broader orbit that the best thing to do is to sort of let Trump be Trump and hope he doesn't go too far outside of the guardrails. And if he does, to try to reel him back slowly. And they did that the other day. But I think the rest of this is sort of a sunken cost.
My goodness. White House reporter for Axios, Mark Caputo, thank you very much. His latest reporting for Axios on the U.S. easing bank sanctions amid Venezuela's economic woes is online now.